Are you sick of hearing about 50 Shades of Grey yet? I know I am. Especially because everyone just keeps repeating the same things about it. Oh, that's right. Time to cash in any goodwill I received, because I'm doing a redeeming review of 50 Shades of Grey. Welcome to Redeeming Review, where we find meaning in books and movies that everyone else just seems to keep overlooking. Because even a great movie can be kinda racist, and even a terrible movie can have a silver lining. It's rarely black and white. There always seem to be shades of gray. I can already hear you through your speakers. But David, why would you even want to find anything redeeming about 50 Shades of Grey? Everyone already agrees they literally hate it, even the lead actor in the movie. Yeah, and that's exactly why I want to talk about it. Because regardless of whether or not hating 50 Shades of Grey is justified, hating 50 Shades of Grey is also just really trendy. And I don't think it's always because it's poorly written, or it's smutty, or it encourages domestic abuse. Those are fine things to have against it. But a lot of times we just take pleasure in attacking something that's really low-hanging fruit and easy to gang up on. Yeah, 50 Shades of Grey does a lot wrong, but its greatest sin, the one that makes it so easy to hate, is that it's popular. 50 Shades of Grey was a phenomenon, and the backlash against it was kind of its own phenomenon. It makes sense though. Shouldn't there be some kind of righteous indignation when stuff like this becomes popular? We all tell ourselves little private stories to make sense of the world around us. A world where 2.5 Men can be the most popular sitcom on television for years on end. And usually, the story we tell ourselves goes a little like this.
Did you ever notice that? How many really stupid people you run into during the day? Look at it this way. Think of how stupid the average person is, and then realize half of them are stupider than that.
You catch that? There was one really important word in there. Let's try again.
And then realize half of them are stupider than that.
The word was them. Because in the private story we tell ourselves, it's everyone else that's too stupid, not us. I'm guilty of doing this too, though. I'm great at turning myself into an outsider, looking in and judging society. Because it's really easy. It's really easy for me to judge somebody just because they like Family Guy, or Glee, or Entourage, or the 6th season of Lost. But at the same time, I'm willing to give myself a pass when I realize I've run out of episodes of The People's Court to watch on YouTube, or I've seen almost everything Kate Hudson's ever been in. The most frustrating epidemic of Western society is elitism, and it's one that we're all infected with. We all like believing we're smarter than some theoretical average person, and we just like being right about things. Which is why when I hear somebody brag about not liking 50 Shades of Grey, or not liking new Dr. Seuss movies, or not liking Mountain Dew, I can't help but think,
what you want, a cookie? The low expectation ever, mother.
We're a few minutes in, and I still haven't gotten to the redeeming part of the review. And that's because I wanted to build some perspective going into this. I don't like 50 Shades of Grey, but that whole topic has been beaten to death by lots of people with more qualified perspectives than me, some 24-year-old guy who happens to own a camera. No, what I want to talk about is a question that parents have been asking their children since before recorded history. If your friends all jumped off a cliff, would you do it too? It makes sense. Just because something's popular doesn't mean it's good or good for you. But I think we always have to ask a follow-up question. Why are all my friends jumping off a cliff? There must be some kind of perceived benefit to it. Otherwise, why would they do that instead of doing something else?
Please, don't do this.
You won't stay with me any other way.
Regardless of where 50 Shades of Grey falls on the scale between subjugating women and liberating women, it's providing something that throngs of those women don't feel they're getting anywhere else. And because of that alone, I think we have to look at it pretty seriously. Because we haven't seen this many grown women obsess over a story since...
There's also an unlikely group of Twilight fans. Meet the Twilight Moms.
Yep, Twilight. A story written for teenage girls that was sort of co-opted by adult women who called themselves Twilight Moms. Or Twi Moms if you're cool. It wasn't just Twilight. Stories like Hunger Games and Divergent all had similar fan bases, again, in spite of being written as young adult fiction. So what's going on with these stories? What have they all got in common?
So crazy right now, your love's coming.
Whoa, slow down a minute, David. Just what exactly is young adult fiction? Well, it looks like this. Books typically written for teenagers and tweenagers. You've probably read a lot of them. And what do these young adult books have in common? Well, yes, they were all so popular they were turned into TV shows and movies, but also each one was written by a female author. In an entertainment industry where the most prominent content creators are men, young adult fiction is an area where women aren't just prevalent, but leading the genre. According to The Atlantic, a 2012 NPR poll showed that 63% of the top young adult fiction authors were women. Compare that to the contemporary numbers collected by the Writers Guild of America for women in television, which hovers around 30%. Or the exact same year, when San Diego State University found that in top grossing films, women comprised a whopping 18% of all directors, producers, writers, cinematographers, and editors. That's basically all the creative positions. Like it or not, young adult fiction is the place for female representation right now. So it's not really that big of a surprise that women of all ages have been flocking to it. But what does this have to do with 50 Shades of Grey? Well, to explain that, we're going to have to go back to the beginning. 50 Shades of Grey, as I'm sure you know, was published back in 2011 by E.L. James, a housewife from England. But it was actually written long before that in 2009. Back then, E.L. James was a huge Twilight fan who wrote her own fanfiction stories about Edward and Bella. She went by the name Snow Queen's Ice Dragon, and her top story was called Master of the Universe. It was so popular, she became something of a Twilight fanfiction celebrity. She wanted to publish Master of the Universe, but first had to cover up all the Twilight stuff. So the blank innocent Bella Swan was now the blank innocent Anastasia Steele. And the supernaturally sexy rich vampire Edward became the supernaturally sexy rich normal human being Christian Grey. And with that, 50 Shades of Grey was born, becoming the first mainstream work of young adult fiction, taking the framework for what had been successful and giving that audience something especially for them. And it worked. It worked really well. Scientists in a lab couldn't have invented a more popular book. And I think we can learn a lot from that.
So crazy right now, your love's coming.
Look at Frozen. It was made for kids, but the fact that it focuses on two women and their relationship made us so ecstatic, we had to overlook the fact that it's basically just a mediocre movie with one good song.
So he's a bit of a fixer-upper, so he's got a few flaws.
We want stories that reflect real life, but when half the population's stories aren't being told, we just get even hungrier for them. The problem is that, as audiences and just as people in general, we're not always very good at articulating what we want. And lots of times we're not even really conscious of what we want ourselves. It's a phenomenon called miswanting. The masses weren't demanding a movie with two Disney princesses in it. Once it showed up, we realized it was actually meeting a need that we weren't even really aware we had. And I think that's what 50 Shades of Grey kind of stumbled into. If 50 Shades of Grey is the cliff, why are so many people, especially women, jumping off it? I'm not going to claim to speak on their behalf, but when I look at a lot of these clips, it seems pretty apparent that it's filling a pretty profound need for a lot of them.
A godsend. You have changed every mother, and if you're not a mother, every woman's life.
But what I think we can know is this. We're reaching a cultural tipping point. We're demanding new stories and new perspectives, especially from women. But we're not always very good at understanding why or knowing what that should look like. We return to what's familiar to us until we're given something new that we're convinced works as well or better. That's why even the best academic treatise or niche feminist film just can't move mainstream audiences as well as a simply written story with simple ideas and broad appeal, maybe even bordering on ignorant. So like I said, I can't tell you exactly why 50 Shades of Grey speaks to so many women. That's just not really my place. But for all the people out there who think that 50 Shades of Grey is at best stupid or at worst damaging, why would you ever leave it at that? If all your friends were jumping off a cliff, wouldn't you want to know why? Maybe there's a giant wolf chasing them, and jumping off a cliff just seems like the best option they have. And maybe that wolf is going to come for you next. And maybe if we put all our heads together, we can find a better solution than jumping off of all of these cliffs. We can't be outsiders looking in on society. We're all constant participants. And I think the valuable thing that 50 Shades of Grey has given us is a big conversation. I think that's pretty cool. Because I don't want inertia to have its way. I don't want the future of conversation to look like...
Everyone knows what I know except for morons. But you idiots now, getting into it now, like all in bits called now at 1,000, you guys are morons. Seriously. You're idiots. You are idiots. You guys are idiots.
Hey everyone, thanks a lot for sticking through to the end of this kind of long video that I made. Feel free to subscribe for some much shorter videos in the future. Doing Age of Ultron next. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. Also, I wanted to say sorry for calling everything that we like stupid. I was trying to make a point, but for the sake of fairness, I'm now gonna read off a list of things that I like that people think are stupid. iRobot. 97 Godzilla. To Catch a Predator. Anything Tom Cruise is in. Found footage horror movies. Mystery Men. Terrible American Idol auditions. The Walking Dead. The Celebrity Apprentice. Kitchen Nightmares. Cloverfield. Linkin Park. Spider-Man 3.